Hello and welcome to Hydra Collectables, where we let our geek flag fly. My name's Luke and I'm your host, and today we're going to be asking the question, are we due a new comic book age? So today I was going through the room, having a little bit of a clear out, a little bit of a tidy up, rebagging, reboarding and moving some stuff around, and I happened across my Gerber guides. And for those of you who don't know, the Gerber guides are photojournals that were put together by a gentleman, a photographer, and they basically show the majority of the covers of comics throughout the Golden and Silver Age. I don't know if they exactly go all the way to Silver, but definitely the Golden Age. And so this got me thinking. I've got a whole collection of these here. There's 4 books in total, I believe. It got me thinking about comic book ages and how, everyone knows the standard, the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age. People mention the Copper Age and then Modern Age. And I just thought, well, we've kind of been in Modern Age for a really long time. And what happens after? What comes next? And so I want to basically give you guys a little bit of a rundown of these different comic book times and how they kind of define, how they are defined and how the industry as a whole have perceived them over time. And so if that interests you, please stay tuned for the rest of the video. Comics are very much a product of their time. Most people think of superheroes when the word comic is used, and so it has pretty much become a definite trait of these ages. What I mean by that is the comic book ages can almost be put into categories where they are defined by the presence or the absence of our superheroes. The first real comic book is a comic book called The Yellow Kid, which was actually a reprint of the Yellow Kid newspaper strips back in 1897. This, as well as many other comics that followed it, are pre-hero comics, and these are often referred to as the Platinum Age. Fast forward and we would eventually get to Detective Comics issue 1 in 1937. This consisted of short stories previously featured in pulp magazines. Most, if not all, comics back in this time period were actually reprints from newspapers and magazines, meaning we had around 40 plus years worth of comics before that key book that would come, the key book that would herald the Golden Age. And in 1938 we received Action Comics 1, the first appearance of Superman. This in turn led us to Batman in Detective Comics issue number 27 in 1939, and Wonder Woman in the All-Stars Comics issue number 8 in 1941. Also in 1941 we got our first glimpse of Captain America in his own title of the same name. We got many superhero books during the time of World War II, but once the war had ended many began to fade away. And in 1948 we saw All American Comics push aside Green Lantern for a rename of the series All American Western. This too happened over at Marvel, where we again saw the Human Torch pushed aside for a name change. Batman and Superman somehow survived this time, however Captain America wasn't so lucky, and with the name change to Weird Tales he was eventually phased out and replaced with the horror-based material. By 1951, superheroes as a genre were near to dead, and it was their ghoulish remains that would live on. This pause in the superhero genre is sometimes referred to as the Atomic Age. Superheroes were out, and horror was in. EC Comics thrived during this time, and paved the way for everything horror we have today. These books would show all manner of gruesome depictions, from beheadings to drug abuse, even rape. This gained a lot of attention by the media, and a doctor called Frederick Wortham, who felt these books were encouraging juvenile delinquency. This particular doctor went on to write a very famous book known as The Seduction of Innocence, which I highly recommend you guys check out. It's a really good insight into the history of comics. Whether this belief was true or not, it scared enough people to the point where a new regulation company would be made, the Comics Code Authority. The code brought a huge lull period to the industry as publishers struggled to learn what they could and could not do. However, the once previous master, Bill Gaines, decided that he couldn't make successful horror under these new restrictions, and so decided to discontinue EC Comics in favour of Mad Magazine. Back over at DC Comics, things were going great. They had adapted to the code brilliantly with a new character that was proving very successful. This character was of course Barry Allen the Flash, who would appear in Showcase issue 4 in 1956. This launched the Silver Age, which would run between 1956 and 1969. And this theme of characters gaining superpowers via science experimentation would become the new template for a new age of superheroes. During this time period, we had the Year of the Astronaut, starting in 1961 with Alan Shepard flying above the atmosphere, followed by John Glenn orbiting the Earth in 1962, and finally Neil Armstrong stepping foot on the Moon in 1969. This was of course the time to cue the Fantastic Four, and of course the Fantastic Four, keeping with the new Silver Age tradition, consisted of 4 superheroes who gained their abilities through scientific events. Marvel would continue this theme of giving superheroes powers by a scientific method, and in 1962, in an issue of Amazing Fantasy 15, we were finally given the Amazing Spider-Man. Both Marvel and DC seemed to flourish during this time, but eventually America would be worn down by the Vietnam War, and NASA would eventually lose funding for further space exploration. And so in 1970, we saw the reappearance of Conan the Barbarian in comic book form, after restrictions were loosened by the Comics Book Code Authority, and so began the Bronze Age. The magic and the innocence of the Silver Age was lost, and the Bronze Age brought with it much darker tones and anti-heroes, leading to the likes of the Punisher and Wolverine, both in 1974. The Bronze Age would take us to 1985, where the Copper Age, aka the Dark Age, was formed. A huge boom was hitting the industry, with many independent companies popping up that didn't seem to require the code like our former two, Marvel and DC. And so, therefore, Marvel and DC were forced to play catch-up and thus turned their heroes into something dark and gritty. In 1985, we saw Crisis of Infinite Earths, as well as Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns and Alan Moore's Watchmen. Our heroes were here, but they were dark and complex. This dark age would carry on until the 1990s, where suddenly the comic book industry would go to these strange and unusual and somewhat extreme places. We had the birth of X-Force and Youngbloods, and things were big, bold and intense. A lot of these creators during this time would later go on to create Image Comics. This was sometimes referred to as the extreme age of comics, and it was one hell of a crazy time. We had hologram covers, strange anatomy gimmicks, swimsuit specials, we had the lot, and it was messed up for the market, and it pretty much run it into the ground. Then in 1998, a movie came out, and that movie was of course Blade. Blade was Marvel's first successful attempt at making a movie, and compared to the MCU today, it is very, very different. The success of Blade would then lead us to the X-Men movies, and from there everything we have grown to love in cinema. Suddenly out of nowhere we had successful comic book movies, and this would change comics forever. We now live in a world where comics that used to once be the source material are now actually influenced by these movies, and it seems a very strange and unusual place to be. So, there you have it. That is a brief history of the comic book ages. I feel like we are currently living in the movie age of comics. I know we're currently technically in the modern age, but I do feel like this modern age is spanning for quite a significant amount of time, and I feel like maybe we need to cap that off and move forward with something else. It's going to be interesting to see though when that does happen. Now, whether this is before or after the whole superhero movie craze has come to a close, we will have to wait and see. But when it does happen and we do cap off the modern age and move forward, one, what are we going to call it? And two, does that then mean that those books become more expensive to get graded and slabbed, etc.? You know, as some of you know who do get your books graded, the older or rarer the book, the more it costs to get slabbed. So, you know, this is no easy thing. Once this happens, once we do move forward, it is going to have a knock-on effect of everything else. So maybe the longer we can pull it off, the better. But yeah, who knows? Anyway, with that said, before I go, I would like to encourage you guys to hit that likes and maybe leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It really does mean a lot. I've now been doing these videos for almost 3 months, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this experience. I love all of you guys that take the time to, you know, comment here on YouTube and have a discussion, or hit me up on Instagram and have a discussion there. This is exactly why I started this channel, to meet like-minded people like yourselves. And the Comics with Friends videos are going great, and by all means, if anyone would like to take part, it is open invitation. providing you are comfortable, you know, coming on and being on camera and have something to say, providing you keep it clean because I'd like to be family friendly, then I will welcome you with open arms. You know, it's all about meeting those like-minded people and having great discussions, and for me, learning new stuff. You know, there's a lot about comics and comic book characters that I don't know, and already with these videos I have had my eyes opened. So yeah, thank you so much. You are all appreciated. And so until next time, I'll see you in another life. Take care.